Dear colleagues, greetings. Today we are going to present you our project about Japan. Japanese craft has its roots and rural crafts necessities of ancient times. Traditionally, objects were created for use, not just for demonstration, and therefore the boundary between craft and art was not always very clear. However, the products were produced not only for domestic consumption, but at some point items such as ceramics made by craft studios began to be exported and became an important basis of the economy. In Japan, there is an Asiatic mode of production which characteristics are below, so you can see them on the side. Because yarn was extremely cheap to produce, others saw potential profits and set up similar companies elsewhere. Large-scale production and export of cotton and silk yarn provided Japan with an industrial revolution in the light industry at the end of the 19th century. Less than 30 years after the Meiji Restoration, a capitalist economy was established in the country. Nippon 2022. It can be said that in Japan, state socialism has become an extreme populist and extremist form of national socialism. Cyberleninka 2020. The Meiji Restoration was a complex of political, military, and socio-economic reforms in Japan, which turned a backward agrarian country into one of the leading states in the world. It was a transition from the samurai system of government in the person of the shogunate to direct imperial rule in the person of Emperor Matsuhita and his government. The restoration policy significantly influenced their state system, legislation, their imperial court, provincial administration, finance, industry, diplomacy, education, religion, and other spheres of Japanese life. Japan did not start large-scale industrialization until the country faced the threat of Western imperialism in the second half of the 19th century. In order to remain independent and catch up with the West, Japan successfully undertook an industrial revolution that made it the first industrialized country in Asia over the period of just half a century. Japan Guide 2020. It should be noted that by implementing all these measures, Matsuhita did not slip into radicalism. He exchanged embassies with the Western rules and willingly borrowed the best from foreigners, be it science, technical achievements, or European-style clothing. Aspect Center 2021. Then the four largest industrial centers of Japan are located Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagaya, Kobe, Osaka, and Kitakusho. The Tokyo-Yokohama region accounts for almost a third of Japan's total industrial output. The sphere of production in this region is cast iron and steel, as well as the electrical and electronic materials. The port of Yokohama is focused on eastern trade with North America. Nagoya Industrial Complex textiles and ceramics. The Kobe Osaka region is focused on the heavier industries such as shipbuilding, diesel plants, but also contains the main branches of Japan's textile, chemical, and cement industries. Kobe is an important foreign port oriented to the west to Southeast Asia. The fourth region is an important channel for a large volume of Japanese imports due to their proximity to other Asian countries, which are Japan's main exporters. Currently, Japan is a global manufacturing giant, ranking second after the United States. Geography Notes 2021. Summary: Japan has been in the stage of agrarian development for a long time. Then, active industrialization began only after the threat of Western imperialism. After that, geographically, the country is not too rich in resources, which requires it to look for ways to get these resources. After that, to date, the Japanese empire is one of the most successful countries in the world in economic sphere. Now I want to give the floor to my colleague Daria.
Thank you, Lisa. Japan is the country extremely poor with natural resources. The most numerous are silver, iodine, copper, iron ore, coal, lead, and zinc. However, the quality of many of them is substandard, hence Japan prefers to import. Today, precious metals are mainly used in production of electronics. For instance, copper, which beforehand was used as currency and in sculptures. Silver is extracted on a higher scale, is mainly used in chemical industry, but largely exported. Uh, Extraction of oil and natural gas started relatively recently, and they are mainly used in fuels. 70% of all Japanese territory is covered with forests. However, due to environment protection measures, these forests are untouched. Just a small share of Japanese soils is used for agriculture. However, the water resources are numerous. In addition to sea water spreading with opportunity for fishing, there are vast mountainous rivers, not convenient for transport needs, but useful as a source of hydro energy. The three sectors of the Japanese economy are highly unequal. The primary one shares in employment and GDP are minor and they're declining. As for the secondary one, its shares are approximately a quarter and it is also diminishing. Services are the most developed sector in Japanese economy. Their share in GDP and employment are almost equal and constitute 70%. Manufacturing is still a significant industry, however, its role is declining. Some of the tertiary industries, such as healthcare and also aerospace, biotechnology, electronics, are flourishing and actively developing. Nonetheless, yet their share is not notable. Most industrial centers are concentrated nearby the coastline. The biggest one is Tokyo. There are machinery, electronic, transport equipment, and textile productions. Osaka and Nagoya, they are smaller, and they are specialized mainly on textile, arm and steel industries, and transport equipment creating. Japan has developed labor legislation, establishing trial and limited notice periods, and other regulations of employee-employee relations. These policies, as well as traditional devotion to one particular company, explain the prevalence of regular over non-regular staff in the country. A creation of legal labor unions started after the Second World War. However, today they live in third decline as a result of improved labor conditions. Only 20% of all workers took part in unions. Japanese educational system is complicated at all the stages. 9 years of schooling are compulsory. However, further education is not free of charge and it is limited. As Japan is the country with one of the biggest life expectancies, the concept of lifelong education is extremely important. Population of Japan used to grow till 2008, then the trend changed. The birth rates are falling, the death rates on the country are growing, and after the 2010, this gap started to increase. The other determining factor is net migration rate. Almost 2 previous decades, the index was positive, also resulting in decline of population. The pyramid demonstrates that currently the proportion of newborn children is smaller than the proportion of adult population, resulting in aging problem. Japan is now on the fourth stage of demographic transition, characterized by low birth and death rates and decline of population. The average density is 332 people per kilometer squared. However, central regions are sparsely populated due to mountains. Thus, majority lives in south and nearby the coasts. In Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Kyoto city areas, these countries are highly urbanized, approximately 90%. To sum up, Japan lacks in resources. With many cases, the extraction of those which it possesses is expensive and inefficient. Thus, it mainly exported them. Absence of agriculture and other sources results in decline of primary and secondary sectors of economy. Machinery, electronics, biotechnology, manufacturing are important and they are located in and near city areas. In Japan, there are developed legislation and weak unions. Professional education is valuable, thus the labor market is not very elastic. The population is declining. Also, Japan faces the problem of aging of labor force and population. By the way, the country is highly urbanized. Dasha?
So thank you, Daria. I would like to continue. The human development increase shows the improvements in the lifestyle and the satisfaction of population of the environmental commodities. The recent years, HDI of Japan is approximately the same, viewing changes only in less developed countries. Even having a huge wage of unemployment for the 2021, Japan see the short level of it with the change only in 0.1. Japan's productivity by the end of 2021 saw the peak of the last shortage of time. The productivity of developed countries succeeded in remaining at approximately the same level, but unfortunately with Egypt that went to minus numbers. The comparison with the USA in the inequality rate shows that the trend saw its increase by 2009, and the graph allows to see that from 1985 the inequality income in the countries saw their growth. GDP is a sum of business investment, net exports, governmental spendings, and personal consumption. That in Japan dropped by approximately 200 billion, whereas GDP per capita and GDP PPP increased. The paradox is justified by the percent of elder population, which represents the whole majority and predetermine the GDP minimizes it in other data. Here, as we see, the population in other compared countries except Japan have a high lower GDP, justified by the proportion of Asian young people that have different propensity to buy or invest. Japanese empires prevail over exports, and in fact, Japan has high investment foreign sector. Its main trading partners are China, United States, and South Korea. Then moving on to the third-part economic integration project, Asian banks increase integration within the global banking network. The economic development and the transformation of Japanese economy mean the loss of origin state that caused the protests from the part of interest groups that see in these politics the political defeat. But it also means the tighter relations with the leaders on the world market, as USA and Western Europe. Then the three lines of the economic development were outlined. It's double-sided and regional free trade agreement. The first one that means the openness for Japan and other states and the improvement of intergovernmental relations, as with Singapore, Mexico, Korea, and Philippines. The second, economic cooperation with Chiang Mai onwards, means a long-term economic policy of the integration to the Asian market. And the last one, but not the least, foreign direct investment flows, means Japan is a main investor in foreign sector and it must diminish it because all the sectors of production are abroad, viewing the inner uncompetitive market, high wage and tax regulation. Then the main economic and social challenges Japan was faced because of the lost decade in the 90s that caused the stagnation and deflation, and the attempts of government to change the problem in 2012 with free programs of the pandemics. By the governmental spendings and the overview of the trade and growth. And the three solutions were found to keep the recovery going, means the stimulation of economic development, to change in fiscal systems and supply. The second one, investment away from China, because the main focus for Japanese market now is Chinese one, but the changes there also causes changes in Japan. Now the cheap labor force is not cheap, so the higher prices made Japanese to change his mind, and also aggressive Chinese politics influenced it. The last one, addressing Japanese demographic problems. The dependency ratio caused lots of problems as labor shortage and demographic problem, and the possible solution is changes in Japanese economy and immigration system.